Hello, welcome to this episode of White Glove Geography. Today we're looking at the significance of food, water and energy on the well-being of a country, the people and the economy. The key themes we're looking at today are clearly the food, water and energy. Involved in that is malnutrition, development, economy, drought and disease. In some ways, it's quite difficult to conceptualise the difficulties of food, water and energy when we live in an HIC, because the vast majority of us have access to safe water, have access to food, have access to energy. So in terms of the differences, really we're talking about the difference between HICs and LICs. So if people don't have access to food for a long period of time, that means they become malnourished. This particularly affects children because they're still growing. They're in that developmental stage. That gives children at risk of disease in terms of under fives particularly. About a third of those who are under fives who are malnourished, they die each year. And that's a shocking number in terms of some countries. So we're talking about LICs particularly. Malnutrition can affect young people because it affects their education. If they're not getting the right nutrients, they're not getting the right iron intake and vitamins and minerals, that affects their concentration and also mental development as well, the physical development and mental development as well. If we look at this map here, we can see quite a clear pattern going on. We've got the Brant line going on, which is roughly the north of the world. That's the HICs, apart from Australia there in the southwest there. And in the south of the world, generally, we've got the LICs. So North America here, we can see there's very few people that are undernourished. Europe and the northern part of Asia here, we've got very few people undernourished, and also in Australia. Now, often people talk about Africa as one kind of land mass, as one country, but it's not. There's a huge variation. You can see it in the north of Africa, so countries like Libya and Egypt, they've got very, very few people that are undernourished. Also in the country of South Africa, very few people that are undernourished, and there's huge variations between that. In terms of the economy, if people are not getting the nutrients, that means they're not doing well at school, they're not getting the qualifications, they're not getting skills, and they're not getting better jobs, which means they're not paying tax to the government, which then can invest in schools and better infrastructure. Also, if they're underperforming at school, that means that future generations also struggle as well. We have another choropleth map here, and this shows the distribution of safe water across the world. Again, you can see the very, very similar divides on the food line. Generally, in the north of the world, it's the richer, it's the HICs, and generally in the south of the world, it's the LICs. But you can see clearly, in terms of water, there's a big difference now between South America. So lots of areas of South America have access to safe water. So we're talking about clean water, we're talking about safe water, it's had the impurities taken out, and any things that are going to cause disease. Sometimes the water might get polluted by sewage outflow, or it might get polluted by some kind of chemical outflow, and raw sewage getting into water, that can cause diseases such as cholera and typhoid. That's going to lead to dehydration due to extreme sickness and diarrhea. And of course, to solve that, people want to drink water, but maybe the water they want to drink, that also is not clean, so it's going to make the problem even worse. In exams, if you mention the word disease, if you always say such as cholera, then that will give you an extra mark as well, and that's always a great example. In terms of the home, water is used for drinking, washing and cooking. In terms of industry, producing goods such as clothes, lots of water is used in that. Also cooling systems in factories and cooling systems in power stations. So water has got economic use as well for making money, as well as using it in homes. In terms of this map here, we can see into North America, we've got USA, we've got Canada, so they've got high access to safe water. Over here in the northern part of Asia and Europe, again, high access to safe water. Now there's some interesting data here. There's a lot of variation. There's a couple of anomalies. So here we've got Botswana. Now that has got high access to safe water, and neighbouring countries have got very, very different rates as well. But also bear in mind, even though people have access to safe water, in our country we think about that in terms of our houses. So there might be a number of different sinks and taps around the house. But technically, if maybe 10 families share one tap that's clean water, it's still access to safe water, but it means very, very different things in different countries. Here we've got a choropleth map about energy use per capita. Per capita just means per person in geography. So this shows how much energy each country uses on average per person. When we talk about energy, we're not just talking about plugging in our phones to recharge in our sockets. We're talking about all the energy, whether it comes from gas or oil, even cars, petrol, anything that we use that creates energy. You can see there's a huge variation across the world, and actually this time North America, there's a huge difference. They use huge amounts of energy, and there's also another anomaly that's the same colour as that, which uses between 75,000 and 100,000 kilowatt hours, and that's Saudi Arabia here. Now, this is the problem with choropleth maps, because the whole country of Saudi Arabia is coloured in. In reality, there's only actually a couple of cities that are going to use the vast majority of the energy, and most of the rest of it in this area is just desert. Now, energy, when it's produced in a country, the making of the energy and the distribution of the energy, that's called the energy or the electricity infrastructure. And HICs tend to use a lot more energy, and LICs tend to use a lot less energy. In LICs, so some parts of Central Africa here, the energy they use is going to come from fuel wood. So going out and collecting wood for fuel for cooking on and heating. That then means that there's going to be increased rates of deforestation in these countries. You can see here in South America there's a very, very similar energy use per capita across the country, and also in Australia and New Zealand. So those are HICs as well. So in summary, we've got food, we've got water, we've got energy. All these things, if there's a lack of it in a country, particularly in LICs, NEEs, that means that they're not going to be able to develop properly as a person in terms of social, and as children, particularly growing up. There's going to be more disease, such as cholera, which is going to have an impact upon how they're going to be able to do their job. Often the qualifications that they get are going to be lower because of the developmental issues, and that then affects the economy. And that then in future generations means there's going to be less tax collected by the government, which then means there's less tax and less money to spend on the infrastructure, such as schools, such as hospitals, to look after people. And it's a cyclical thing that then carries on for future generations.